Now entering Nerdist.com.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, Episode 23, A Taste of Armageddon.
Welcome, dear listeners. Please do as you are told and step peacefully into the listening chamber for another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. This won't hurt a bit.
That's right. The computer has determined that it is your turn to join us as we dive into the morals and ethics of the Star Trek universe, one episode at a time. Lucky you.
Today, we've got a delicious tidbit for your dining pleasure. A taste of Armageddon.
That's good, because really a taste is about all I can... I couldn't possibly.
Yeah, no, you don't want to overfill an Armageddon.
We're 23 episodes in, but do you think we should tell people who we are?
Should we?
I'm Ken Ray, one of the people who does the whole Star Trek thing, Mission Log thing, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast thing. And over there, wherever over there happens to be...
I'm John Champion.
Yeah,
I'm the other Mission Log guy.
one of, yes. And then there are the behind-the-scenes guys and the little people that we would like to thank if we ever actually get an award for doing something like this.
Right. Hey, haven't we recently faced an all-controlling computer driving society? Where, I don't know, maybe humans or people are serving only at the will of the computer. Haven't we just seen this not that long ago?
Do you mean on Star Trek?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I don't mean in your living room. I mean in Star Trek.
I think we did. Well, I kind of don't want to say. I mean, yeah, we did that in Return of the Archons. Archons 2, Electric Boogaloo. I think that it was the original title. A lot of people don't know that, but it's true. Except for the part where it's true. I don't know that the computer is actually in control here, but we can get to that in a second. But before we get to anything, we always want to let people know that they can always get in touch with us. If it's the middle of the night and you're thinking, I'm not sure I agree with what John and Ken said. Or maybe it's the middle of the night, you're thinking, I wholeheartedly agree with what John and Ken said. Either way, you want to let us know. So many different ways that you can do that. Mission Log Pod applies to a lot of them. That's our handle on Facebook. That is our handle on Skype. That is our handle on Twitter. So, do the whole, facebook.com/missionlogpod or missionlogpod on Skype or at missionlogpod on Twitter. Or you can just call us if you want to. Just, forget the whole text thing. 323-522-5641, 323-522-5641. You can email us if you want to go back to the text thing, missionlog@roddenberry.com, missionlog@roddenberry.com. And don't forget to check out our super swanky website, missionlogpodcast.com. No place to leave comments there, but any of those other places you can. And as always, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log.
Also try to remember that our egos are very fragile.
Yeah, ridiculously please. In fact, somebody's thinking something bad about me right now, and already I've got a little tear inside.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I'm like that, dude. My ego is very fragile. In fact, I'm sort of insulted that you think yours might be more than mine.
Hey, we have gotten some great comments over the last several episodes. There's going to start making their way not only into our episodes, but our supplementals as well. And I love interacting with people on Twitter and Facebook. So thank you so much, everybody who has participated up until now and will continue to chime in. We really, really love to hear what you have to say. And I know what you love to hear, Ken.
You know what I love to hear, John.
I know that you love to hear Star Trek trivia.
I love to hear Star Trek trivia.
All right. Just a couple of tiny points on this one. Mm-hmm. First of all, hey, I'm so glad we have finally reached this point. It only took us 23 episodes to get there. But name check, United Federation of Planets.
Hello. Now we can order the T-shirts.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now that we know what we're going to call this thing.
Yeah, we're no longer flying blind here, looking at the United Planet Earth Space Agency of Probes. I purposely convoluted that.
Space Central, you take a back seat now to the United Federation of Planets.
Yeah. We're very happy about that. Also, I wanted to point out, and we'll talk about kind of our judgment call on the episode later, but spoiler alert, I like the writing in this one, so I wanted to give a shout out to Robert Hammer. And I think what's cool is that he has written for just about everything, TV. And when I say everything, I mean, of course, the critical science fiction TV shows of the 60s and 70s. Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, Time Tunnel, Lost in Space, Planet of the Apes, Mission Impossible. So some really, really cool stuff. He was a career TV man and had a big, big hand in some science fiction that certainly I was a fan of.
Just so I'm clear, Planet of the Apes, any of the movies or the TV series?
I'm talking TV show.
Okay.
TV series on that.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, and you've got a little call out here in trivia for a guest star in this episode.
Well, one of my favorite things, and I feel bad because I didn't look up all of the actors on the show, but I mean, one of my favorite things is when you see an actor or actress on Star Trek and you're like, hey, I know who that is. That's, XYZ. Barbara Babcock, who plays Maya 3 on this episode. Immediately I saw her, I was like, oh, Hill Street Blues. Because she played Grace Gardner in Hill Street Blues. Now, she's been in a lot of other stuff, too. She was in Space Cowboys a few years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Sadly, she was also in Home Alone 4.
Aww.
I know, it kind of makes me sad. But, at least she's working. That's something, right?
Right.
But back in the day, Maya 3, may I just say, yowza. She reminded me of the female robot whose name I can't remember now in What Are Little Girls Made Of? As far as like the outfit and such.
Oh, yeah. Well, of course, Sherry Jackson starring in What Are Little Girls Made Of?
Yeah. And I would go on to say to the costume designer, thank you, sir. May I have another?
It's going to be that kind of show, isn't it?
Puntastic.
All right. Hey, by the way, speaking of actors in this, one little bit here that I thought I'd make you aware of. I remember in The Cage, we did not have Dr. McCoy, but instead we had Dr. Boyce, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the actor in this who plays Anan Seven, and I'm going to butcher the name, bear with me. It's David Opatoshu. Opatoshu. Okay.
Okay.
He was actually considered for the role of Dr. Boyce.
Okay. I thought you were going to say it was the same guy, and I was like, well, that is just amazing makeup because they don't look anything alike. But let me get this straight. You're telling me that the guy who plays a one-shot on one episode of Star Trek was considered for a role on another episode of Star Trek that actually never got picked up?
Right. Well, it could have. It could have.
Oh, God. You go deep, my friend.
In a parallel universe, it could have been all about Dr. Boyce. You don't know.
In a parallel universe, who could have played what now? In a parallel universe, I'd be the one recapping the episodes for you, though it would still probably go a little something like this.
Prologue. The Enterprise is on a diplomatic mission carrying Ambassador Robert Fox to Eminiar 7. When they arrive, it's code 710, which means stay away. Well, this could be a really short episode, but Ambassador Fox tells Kirk to stay put. We're parking the ship right on their front doorstep. Act 1. The last ship that was here, the USS Valiant, failed to return from Eminiar 7 50 years ago when the planet was at war with its neighbor. But we won't let that detail stop us from going in for a visit. Kirk, Spock, and a couple of other crewmen beam down to look around, leaving Scotty in charge. Eminiar 7 is not a bad place at all. Architecturally stunning, clean, attractive residents. We could really get used to this place. Maya 3 is on hand to greet the landing party, but she tells them they are in danger. She introduces them to the High Council and one Anan 7. Anan 7 rejects the idea of opening diplomatic relations and tells Kirk that they have been at war for 500 years. Spock says, hold on just a moment. There's no sign of war here. Anan doubles down and says, oh yes, there is a war. We lose between 1 and 3 million people every year because of the skirmishes with our enemy planet, Vendikar. No time to debate, though. An attack is coming in now. The city has been hit. But wait, there's nothing going on. No destruction, no radiation, no explosion. Kirk has no idea what is happening. Spock figures it out, though. The war is being waged by computers. The buildings and civilizations survive, but the people who are casualties voluntarily step into disintegration machines. Oh, and by the way, that computer war made the Enterprise a casualty, which means the entire crew on board is dead. Theoretically. They need to show up for disintegration. Act 2. The landing party are held as prisoners while Anand figures out what to do about all the casualties from this virtual war. On board the Enterprise, Scotty is radioed by Kirk, who says, "Hey, guess what? This place is great. Start sending down the entire crew for shore leave." Except, well, that wasn't Kirk. It was Anand laying a trap, but Scotty has already figured out this ruse, and he has the Enterprise computer verify his suspicion. There's not going to be a shore leave on his watch. Back in the holding area, Spock busts out with a new trick. He uses a Vulcan mind meld to essentially hypnotize the guard who is standing outside their door to turn around and unlock their room. Kirk makes short work of the guy, knocking him out to then steal his disruptor weapon. The landing party make a break for it and walk down a corridor to witness some of the locals in line for this disintegration machine. It's kind of like waiting in line at Starbucks, but with less coffee and more disintegration. Maya 3 is headed there too, but Kirk stops her. Spock acquires another hand weapon from a guard, and Kirk wipes out the disintegration machine. Word gets back to the High Council, and Anand is none too pleased. He's fed up enough that he orders the planet's real weapons to open fire on the Enterprise. Act 3. Scotty had been just suspicious enough that he had the ship's deflectors turned on. That weapon fire from Miniar bounces off, but now there's a little more worry that Kirk and the landing party are actually in trouble. Scotty is planning a counterattack when Ambassador Fox shows up and says there will be no such thing. Back on the surface, a landing party takes refuge in their old holding room, but they've got weapons now, a communicator, and a couple of uniforms worn by the locals. Maya is with them, and Kirk tries to reason with her. Fox, meanwhile, has contacted the Miniar High Council, and Anand spins quite the yarn about the accident in attacking the Enterprise. Everything is just fine now. In fact, the ambassador should come down and have a look around for himself. See? That's how you do diplomacy. Scotty is not impressed, though. He hasn't heard from the captain, and he's not about to start taking orders from Fox. He's going to keep the ship on alert, just in case. Kirk sneaks into Anand's quarters and holds the councilman at the point of a disruptor. Reason and debate about their form of waging war wears on Kirk's patience. He wants his communicators back, and he threatens that he will single-handedly take down this planet if he has to. That's some big talk, but the guards waiting outside of Anand's door knock out Kirk. Act 4. Welcome to the surface of Miniar 7, Ambassador Fox. Sorry you won't be able to stay. We're leading you right to one of our lovely disintegration chambers. Spock gets the stolen Miniar communicator to work well enough to contact Scotty just in time to learn that Fox has in fact beamed down. Spock leads a rescue mission to liberate the ambassador and in the process destroys another one of those disintegration chambers. Kirk is in the council chamber, and he is being lectured by Anand about the rules of warfare. It is imperative that real casualties be recorded, or else real war, may break out with Vendikar, the worst possible outcome. The prospect of actual combat really freaks out Anand. He contacts the Enterprise to demand that the crew start beaming down, or else all the hostages will be killed. Kirk leaps up and yells for Scotty to carry out General Order 24 in 2 hours. Want to know what that order is? That's the order for the Enterprise to give Miniar all she's got in the weapons department. That'll ruin Anand's day, along with the entire rest of the population of the planet. We sure hate to know what the other 23 orders are. Scotty confirms the order in an announcement to the Council, and Kirk finds his moment of distraction as a good time to steal a weapon from one of the guards. At that moment, Spock shows up, and the two carry out their plan to destroy the Miniar war computers. Kirk tells Anand that real war is now on the table, but there is an alternative. They can start planning for peace instead by contacting Vendikar. Fox volunteers to stay behind and help. Safe back on board the Enterprise, we learn that Ambassador Fox is working on negotiating peace, and Spock is a little surprised at the size of the risk Kirk took. Kirk explains that he took a calculated risk, that they stood a greater chance of survival by facing the reality of the horror of war.
Yeah.
Are we done?
No. There's just some interesting things that happened in this episode, but that's the whole rest of the story. I'm sorry. I'm prepping, and I know I should have been prepared already, but now I'm prepping.
Well, by the way, just in terms of the minor things we like to point out, hey, we get to welcome back another stuffy Starfleet official who just seemingly has no clue
what's up with
how things really work.
What there was Ferris in Galileo 7.
Yep.
And now we have Ambassador Fox. And it's like first of all, like apparently Ambassador is just a job. He just does that, when he has to. But when he's on board the Enterprise, total jerk.
Yeah.
Start to finish. There is not a second of, well, I think your position is interesting, Captain Kirk, but how about this instead? No, it's just
right.
I'm the boss of you, dude. I mean, that's pretty much Ambassador Fox all the way through the episode, until he is about to be turned into some sort of powdery substance. Yeah.
So in the future, 300 years from now, plenty of clueless bureaucrats to go around.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of that Saturday Night Live sketch years and years and years ago. Dan Aykroyd was it was like a late night infomercial for how to become a U.S. ambassador, and then the most important item was learning how to say "please pass the sweet and sour shrimp" in like 20 languages.
That's kind of funny.
It is.
That's kind of funny. You see, I'm actually reminded of one of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books when they supposedly the Gulga Frenchum was going to send 3 arcs of people. They were going to send the really important people, and they were going to send the people who built the society, and then they were going to build the people in the middle, like the telephone sanitizers and people like that. Yeah. Ambassador Fox would be on the B arc.
Right. Oh, hey, Ken, do you remember that thing that we introduced not that long ago with Return of the Archons called the Prime Directive?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry. It's not going to be around for this one either.
That's really funny because I had almost the exact same thing written, except it was, hey, remember the Prime Directive? Kirk doesn't.
Right.
Yeah. There are actually a few of those, though, that happened in this episode. Hey, remember the time Spock was ready to kill Gary Mitchell because he might become too powerful? Spock doesn't. Because they have this whole thing in this episode where Kirk is like, it's almost like he's taking Spock aside and saying, now, we may have to kill people. I hope we don't, but I need you to understand. And I'm thinking, he totally understands. Remember when he was ordering weapons behind your back?
He's the enforcer. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Also, remember the time Kirk was ready to blow up a whole ship full of retreating Gorn? Kirk doesn't. Oh, we may have to kill somebody. Like it's a hardship for him. Please, last time he was thinking about killing somebody, he couldn't think about anything else.
Yeah.
And then finally, remember last week when Spock couldn't understand how the humans could admire Khan without approving of Khan?
I love that bit, yeah.
Spock doesn't, because he completely understands the killing machines. He doesn't agree with it, but he understands it. He doesn't approve, but he sort of admires. But he doesn't get when humans do that with other humans because, they're humans and they're almost subhuman. Oh, no, sub-Vulcan. My bad.
Right. Hey, as far as the Miniar go with their war with Vendikar, Anon 7 says that for 500 years they've been losing between 1 and 3 million people. That is ambitious, or they breed like rabbits.
I was going to say there could be rabbits on their flag.
Yeah.
That could actually, on their planetary flag, it could be like, yes, just one rabbit.
That's a lot of people.
2 rabbits. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, and Kirk, I'm sorry, Spock actually has he has a special power in this one. Now, we've introduced the idea of the mind meld. We kind of have an idea of what happens there. But in this, he's using it more like mind control. It's a little weird, a little creepy.
Well, he says that Vulcanians have a limited amount of, telepathy or mind control? Telepathy?
Yeah.
He says in the thing, they kind of lost this, didn't they?
Right.
Good.
Yeah, right.
Because otherwise, and I mean, it's neat and it works okay and it gets the guy through the door and it's played well and all that stuff. But, I mean, really at some point, Spock would just become like Dr. Manhattan. Like far too powerful to actually, first of all, far too powerful to be second in command. But second, really, I mean, that just makes the Vulcans, which I'm still going to call them, that just makes the Vulcans far too powerful to deal with, it seems.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, maybe that's why they are so full of repression. But I tell you who's not repressed, and that is Kirk when it comes to destroying computers.
Yeah. Love it.
But here's the thing. Like, if you are at an Apple store and you see Captain Kirk coming toward the Genius Bar with a problem, get away. Step out of the store, because it's probably going to end in phaser fire and explosions.
It may well, yes. Well, especially if he's talking to somebody and they say, well, I'm sorry, sir, it says in the computer. Oh, does it?
Right. And, we're back in this episode to the happy ending where we're all on the bridge and we kind of pose for the tableau, but it is a little less creepy. It's not the slap on the back and have an uncomfortable laugh kind of ending. It's more just the bookend to the show. So I'm glad we've gotten away from that a little bit here.
There was a lot of real humor in this episode. Actually, there's the writer to whom you gave props earlier. Plays like a decent amount of comedy without being over the top comedy. Like it
wasn't jokey. Yeah.
Right. There's no like ba-ba-da-da-da-da kind of thing. But like when Spock, comes in, like bursts in to save Kirk, and he gets there, and Kirk's actually got the whole room. By the way, that guy should never have been a guard if Kirk can overpower him that easily.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, what you do when you get a prisoner is walk really close to him, but don't pay attention to him. Yeah, okay. So bad training on the part of the I can't remember. I keep thinking Vendikar, and I know that's not it. On the part of the security people from that planet. But then Spock comes in. He's like, oh, I thought you need help. Guess I was wrong. It's kind of cute. But actually, my favorite line is when he goes up. The first time that he goes up to distract one of the guards, he walks up and says, sir, there is a multi-legged creature crawling on your shoulder.
Yes.
That's lovely. That's just a lovely little,
great.
It made me laugh. So, yeah, kind of fun there.
Yeah, it was a great little Spockism.
According to my podcast Battle Simulator program, Mission Log has become the #1 show on the planet and on any planets humans settle in the future. Please, go ahead and send advertising dollars and other tribute based on this assumption.
I'm actually going to do something a little bit different, and I'm going to start our topical discussion with a piece of listener mail. Jake wrote to us not that long ago, and he was actually commenting on Arena, but I thought his comment was so applicable to this episode, A Taste of Armageddon, that I wanted to share it with you now. He says, I was listening to Mission Log on Arena, and the idea you bring up on how killing someone from the seat of a ship is very different from killing someone up close and personal. That thought reminded me of a TED Talk recently about how civilization is constantly becoming safer because we are getting closer and closer to each other. Social media shows you the lives of millions of people in one click, and it's very hard to find the urge or the will to kill someone when you can see a picture of their apartment or their new cat. In Star Trek, there isn't an up-close and personal relationship with these other races, making it easier for us to hurt and kill and feel less guilt. The TED Talk goes on to explain many other factors about why we are safer and safer every year, but that one stuck with me, and that is from Jake Bora. So thank you very much for writing that in, and thank you because that got me thinking about A Taste of Armageddon. In A Taste of Armageddon, we have the opposite problem here. We have the ease of killing because of the heightened technology, but there is this 500-year disconnect from the Vendikarans and the Eminarians. I'm just going to screw up their name throughout the entire thing. That'll be my job here.
Well, I couldn't even remember it a minute ago, so please mispronounce it. That's fine.
You got it. Eminiar. Yeah, anyway. But yeah, that's one of the central ideas here in this show, is that war has become just another technological thing that we do.
You know, it's weird. The premise of that TED Talk, and I would actually like to hear it. So, Jake, if you could maybe write back to us and tell us exactly which TED Talk it is. I mean, the one thing that's kind of odd about that, I mean, on the one hand, I think Jake is definitely right. On the other hand, we kill by remote control now. Mm-hmm. We've got drones that sort of do that. And, you know, so they're flying from way up high, and they target something from way up high, and they drop something from way up high. and the person pushing all those buttons and pulling those levers is hundreds of miles away, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so on the one hand, you're right. I mean, we might lose our will to conventional warfare the more we get to, the more we get to see our supposed enemy, putting up kitten videos. But the technology side of it is sort of, it's sort of like that's okay. All we need is a guy who, can look at a building and say, oh, well, that's a building that I need to destroy, as opposed to I need to kill the people inside that building. Mm-hmm. And I'll go home for dinner when I'm done.
Yeah, well, and that's the separation that's happening here, and that's why Kirk is so appalled at what's going on. The technology makes it too easy for all of this to happen, and they are completely removed from the horror of war. When I look at this episode, the thing that just hits me over the head, and I'm sure it did to you as well, is that this is right at the escalation of the Vietnam War. And the Vietnam War was the first war that was presented into the living rooms of people all across the world, but in the U.S., it was the first television war. Mm-hmm. And every single night, you would turn on the TV and the news would have not only images, but the statistics. So it was just sort of like one more thing that happened. And it just becomes statistics, which are kind of numbing, And I feel like this episode is, partly in response to that, again, the war is just sort of this mechanical thing that we go through that isn't necessarily in our backyard anymore.
Yes, except that we knew people. I mean, I wasn't alive, or, well, I guess the Vietnam War ended in 1974. I was born in 1970, so I was alive for a little bit of it, but I wasn't conscious. My mom knew people in Vietnam, though. Mm-hmm. You're still not talking about quite the same thing. You're right. We sort of get numbed to. When it seems to me that this happened more, no letters. When this happened more was when the Bush administration said that we were not going to have photographs or videotape of the caskets returning home from the Iraq War. Mm-hmm. Then it just became numbers. And the numbers were relatively small compared to the other numbers that we were hearing. And so that really sort of dehumanized it quite a bit, it seems to me. And then, of course, that policy eventually changed. Now, at that point, I think we were already sort of, I guess it wasn't just the Iraq War. It was actually Afghanistan and Iraq. Mm-hmm. Because that policy eventually changed. And then we did start seeing those caskets. It didn't quite have the same effect as it did in Vietnam, though, or during the Vietnam War, because in the Vietnam War, we had maybe 4 channels, and now we've got 500. And you also just we don't have the same kind of news isn't covering that the way news covered that in the 1960s with Vietnam.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like quite the same thing. It feels to me like more of a thing in more modern wars when, as these wars are on television in a very different way. It used to be, here's what's happening in Vietnam. And now it's, take a look at this stunning video. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's being packaged in a different way. And the true horror on our side, or on the U.S. side, was kind of kept from us as far as the flag-draped coffins coming back. That was not allowed when the most recent conflicts began. You can argue about whether or not that's right or wrong, but that certainly feels a lot more like what happened in A Taste of Armageddon, where it's just sort of like, oh, people are dead now. It's a number. Let's move on.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting because, this being on in 1967, of course, no one probably at that time would have even conceived of the way that we package and present war now. I'm sure that would have never crossed somebody's mind.
Well, it depends on how that we would have the kind of access that we would have now. Don't forget, we had newsreels in World War II, certainly. Mm-hmm. That were very pro-America, as they should have been. They were very pro-allies, as they should have been, because at the time we were fighting powers that were trying to take over the world.
Right.
Which is that's a bit different. But even then, I doubt I don't know. It's kind of tough to say. If you had the same sort of always on 24-hour access in 1943, then you might have had, somebody saying, look at this fascinating newsreel of people dying in the cold. You say you can't imagine it, but I mean, certainly we've seen those kinds of things packaged different ways throughout history. We're not just, I don't want to make it sound like I think or that we think, I don't want to speak for you, but I don't think we're at this horrible place where we act this way. I think we're currently at a place where we maybe don't treat it as reverentially as we might.
Yeah.
But I mean, we've done that before too.
Sure. There's another big thing in this episode. We've already made at least one parallel to Return of the Archons. But one of the big things we talked about in that episode was blind faith, just sort of not questioning the status quo. And I thought it was really interesting in this that the purpose or method of the war here doesn't really matter. It's not our fight in any way. Who knows what the origin of the war was, but the residents here are blindly faithful to the computer. Again, they are absolutely faithful to what the computer says, so much so to the extent that they sacrifice themselves because of the, whatever the final answer is that the computer gives them. And there's another kind of blind faith here, and that is the adherence to history, which I thought was so interesting. Every time Kirk argues with Anon 7, Anon says, and Maya as well, well, this is the way we've done it for 500 years. This works because we have been doing it for 500 years. And I've always been kind of knee-jerk skeptical when somebody tells me how much better things were back in the old days. That's just sort of me. And so I felt that as soon as the characters were saying that in this.
Well, but remember, I mean, what go back 501 years. I mean, it was apparently just nearly having both of their cultures almost completely decimated that led them to this idea of, well, what if we just, let's say that I, blew up a city. What would happen? All the people would die. Okay, well, so let's say I blew up a city then. Oh, okay. So we'll kill other people. Just, so you're going to do that too? I mean, the weird thing about it is there were a number of things that I wondered, like, when we're doing this, are they still fighting, like, with the same weapons, theoretical weapons that they had 500 years ago? Or have they continued to develop weapons? And have they continued to develop defenses? And then does the other planet just have to trust the other planet? See, you're sort of somewhere on it that I was not. I don't feel like everybody is trusting the computer. This did not feel to me like Landru. This felt more to me like the computer is a tool. The computer is used to extrapolate, okay, here I am, I'm a non-7. And as a non-7, I say, it's time for us to bomb Vindicar. So I want to use this. It's like playing Risk. I want to use this weapon. And so launch that for me and, tell me how it goes. And then, so the computer on Aminiar talks to the computer on Vindicar 7 and says, okay, well, they just put something here. And maybe the computer on Vindicar knows that something was down for repair, and so that was actually a direct hit, right? I mean, it still feels to me like it's the Aminiars and the Vindicars that are Vindicans. What was it? It was Aminians and Vindicants, whatever. Anyway, it feels to me like Planet A is actually still pushing the buttons and Planet B is, pushing buttons back.
Yeah.
And so it didn't quite feel to me like the whole, well, the computer's fighting the war. It felt like they were fighting their war with the computers. Now, all of that said, we're still taking a lot on faith here. Okay, so wait a minute. Let me understand. You've actually built a bomb that would erase everybody for 15 minutes, but come back. I mean, it reminds me of when I was a little kid, and I would say, "Well, my car has a rocket," and the kid I was playing with would say, "Well, my car has a rocket," and I'd say, "Well, my car has a shield," and he would say, "Well, my car has a shield too." And I'd be like, "Well, mine can be invisible," and he'd be like, "Well, mine can be invisible too," and I was like, "Really, make up something of your own." I actually remember arguing with him. I remember the guy's name. I won't say it in case he's listening, but seriously, dude, make up something of your own. So are these planets actually developing better weapons as we go and then feeding that information into the computer and sharing it? And then the other thing I couldn't help thinking was, are they going to get in touch with the, Vindicans, or are they going to get in touch with Vindicar? And Vindicar is going to be like, really? You guys were still killing yourselves? We stopped that like 490 years ago.
Right. It's all been a game ever since then. Yeah. It's like it's like playing tic-tac-toe in war games,
Right. Because it occurred to us, we don't actually have to die.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, let's say we did and we don't.
Exactly. And laugh about it later. Well, if you were over here, it would be funny. Yeah. Sorry about your 1 to 3 million people every year for the last 500 years. Well,
let's think about that. I mean, how long do you go before you run out of a population? And let's say that this is all on the up and up, and the people of Eminiar and Vindicar, they actually do this, and they actually sacrifice themselves. You get to a point then where who's the last guy left on Eminiar, and who's the last guy left on Vindicar? And then they've got all right, I got a report for the disintegration chamber. So then ultimately the civilization is left behind. Do you assume then that some spacefaring society shows up and goes, wow, well, these are really nice buildings. Thanks, Eminiars, for leaving this behind.
And then we end up with something like the craters a million years ago, just like showing up on a Miniar and just boxing the whole thing up and sending it off someplace.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a couple of questions. I'm gonna do the whole. I think I did this a little bit last week. I'm gonna do the whole dark side of the Federation kind of thing.
Okay.
First of all, the Prime Directive was MIA. I think you might have mentioned this earlier, or maybe you were going to, and I apologize if I'm jumping the gun on you. But Kirk takes it upon himself to upend both of these societies because he doesn't like the way they're doing it. Now, you could say he's doing that because he doesn't want the Enterprise to be destroyed or the people on the Enterprise to be destroyed. But he seems pretty, hell-bent on making sure that the way that they do things is not the way that they're going to do things going forward. He's going to stop the war. Never mind the fact that if they are, in fact, developing weapons, and presumably they've now been able to continue everything else as far as their society, both of the races have evolved naturally. They've gone ahead and been able to, create art and do, all sorts of things. According to the rules that he set up with the Prime Directive a few episodes ago, this is a thriving, growing society. He has no right to come in and destroy everything.
Yeah, and yet, it's much more egregious in this episode than it was in
tiny bit.
Archons.
Yeah, tiny bit. And it also leaves me with the question of wondering, who the inherent good guys are in this episode, because there are two things that really start all of this. Well, there's one thing that starts all of it. Ambassador Fox says, I don't care that they have said we cannot come to their planet. We're going to their planet because we need a port in this area. Thousands of lives have been lost over the past few years that would not have been lost had we had diplomatic relations here. We need a port. We're going to get it. He's very colonial. He's not, he might show up and be like, oh, come on, this will work out for everybody. But he's got a goal, and his goal is what the Federation wants. Never mind what these planets want. The other thing, and you made a joke about this, I don't want to know what the other 23 rules are. We have a General Order 24. We have so let me understand, as the United Federation of Planets, as a tree-hugging, peace-loving, can't we all just get along organization that's trying to knit something together. If we don't like the way you're doing something, we do have a way to destroy your planet.
Right.
And we've actually codified it. It's not even like, Scotty, can you come up with a way to do this? No, it's like, oh, Scotty, by the way, destroy the planet.
Yeah. Well, to paraphrase Kirk, we're not going to use General Order 24 today. We're not going to kill today, except when today is today, and we actually have to do that.
Or decide we have to do that.
Yeah, that's a really, really tough one. And, this episode is so challenging, and I welcome it. I love it because of its challenges, that you almost have to start out with the premise that we say, okay, well, war is bad. All right. Well, I think we can all kind of be on the same page there about that. But then in terms of what war still exists or what violence still exists. There's a right way and a wrong way to do it. But like you said, this sort of colonial attitude of, well, our way is the correct way, your way is the wrong way. Had the Federation never decided to go into this part of space, it would not have mattered one whit to us if they had destroyed themselves completely. And like I said, 500 more years go by, we show up, and look, there are a lot of lovely buildings for us to hang out in.
Maybe.
You know?
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure who the good guys were. I mean, I know we're supposed to think that the Federation is the good guys because it's Star Trek. And they are. But, I mean, they tromped all over the Prime Directive in this episode.
Yeah.
But, I mean, also, I mean, you could argue, if you want to step out of universe for a second, we've only heard the Prime Directive mentioned once. We don't know how important at this point in this episode, how important that's going to be going forward. So, you know, it wasn't like it's been drilled into us for 2.5 seasons and suddenly they're going to tromp all over it.
Right. Yeah, I don't think that Kirk's logic really holds up as well here as it did in Return of the Archons.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, as senseless and stupid as these people walking into disintegration chambers is, yeah, his rationale does not hold up nearly as well here.
Right.
It doesn't seem to me.
But I love his argument. You know, even well, I tell you what, I'll use a Spockism here. I understand, but I don't approve.
Yeah. Like we talked about earlier.
Yeah, because I think the same thing here for me anyway applies to Spock or applies to Kirk. I get it. I really, really do. And I think his argument is good. And the writing there, just from a production point of view, the writing there is very good. And his delivery, Shatner's delivery of it is very good. There
were two things, actually, well, three things that hit me in this episode. This is not so much topics; it's just sort of an observation. So it really belongs in the last segment. Anon 7, not really using his head. When Fox and the one other guy come down there, Fox being the ambassador, Fox being someone to whom people answer. When Fox and the other guy come down, he's thinking, okay, well, that'll be 2 more for the chamber. Not really thinking.
Right.
You know, because Fox is in a position of power. He might actually be able to get the other 400 some odd people up on the ship, down to the planet. He's just, you know, he's thinking nickels and dimes. He really should be thinking about profit potential. Seems to me. True. Now, on a more serious note about that, there were on the episode, there were 2 things that came away from this to me, or that I came away from this. You've mentioned one of them quite a bit. The first one, war is really just as simple as not fighting. And I know that sounds overly simplistic, and I will get at least one email. But to me, it is laughable, almost literally, like to the point that I thought Kirk might start laughing. I know I kind of chuckled a tiny bit when I revisited what they were doing here. It is almost literally laughable that these 2 societies decided 500 years ago that the buildings and all that stuff were going to be fine. You know, they don't want those destroyed, but they need the people killed. So, you know, we'll figure out how many of us you killed, and then we'll kill that many people. That's like a Groucho Marx idea of how war should be fought.
Yeah.
The other thing that I got off it was there was a little bit of AA, and I think you mentioned it a minute ago when you said the whole thing about we're not going to kill today. That's kind of it. We may be, you know, everything that we're afraid that we are. And that's kind of actually an interesting part when Anon 7 is talking about why they do what they do. He's so hurt by what he sees his race as being. We are barbarians. We are killers. We don't have a better angel of our natures. So this is what we do so that, you know, we can at least have stuff. And so that we might evolve. What we do is we accept the fact that we kill. And they accept the fact that they kill, and so we accept the fact that we have to die. We're just going to do it in a neat and tidy and pretty kind of way. And Kirk's answer is, yeah, you're a barbarian. So you know what you do? Try not to be one today. It's totally one day at a time. It is just, you know, I have decided today that I'm not going to drink. I have decided today I'm not going to kill anybody. And, you know, hopefully I won't tomorrow, but tomorrow, you know, I'm working on today, and we'll see what happens tomorrow.
Sure. Well, I love that. I love that about this, and I love that as kind of one of those big themes that keeps creeping up in Star Trek. That we're never, for all the talk that we give about Star Trek being a better future, it's still very much us, and all of our faults are still there, and all of our flaws as humans are still there, but we're managing them. We're trying to be better. We're deciding not to kill, not to be engaged in war. And by the way, speaking of the Armenian idea of war, is there something valid there about the idea that the civilization is more valuable than the people within it?
This is kind of what I was driving at a minute ago. If we decide that we want that more than we want to kill the other guy and run the risk of being killed ourselves, then we pretty much then it's really not that much of a leap to say, so maybe we shouldn't kill them and they shouldn't kill us.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're somebody who cares about that kind of thing. Now, when you're talking about terrorist organizations or guerrilla warfare, when you're talking about an idea rather than a nation, I mean, then you've got another thing that you're dealing with there. But yeah, if you're like, I mean, it was mutually assured destruction is thought to be one of the things that kept, the Soviet Union from blowing up the U.S. and vice versa, right?
Right.
It wasn't the only thing, but it's one of the things. We like, we like living, we like breathing, and we like having places to live and breathe. So we're not going to roll tanks in on everybody, and we're also not going to bomb everybody, because while some of us may survive, who we actually are would perish.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Is their way of doing it better? Only if they're willing to take the next step and go, okay, well, I like having the buildings here, and I like the fact that nothing actually blew up on me, so maybe I just won't go into the disintegration chamber. Maybe we could stop doing that and just... their whole planet's apart, too. You'd really think that would be enough space.
Right.
Should we now discuss the messages, morals, and meanings found in A Taste of Armageddon? Or should we just say we did, and assume it went the way we assume it went?
It's question time here at the Old Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. The time when we ask the questions. Hey, John, I got a question for you.
Uh-oh. There's not going to be any math, is there?
There will be no math on this, I promise you. If Vendikar fires a fake rocket... No. Does this episode hold up as far as you're concerned? Starting with the production side. Let's not do the messages yet. Let's just start with the production. Okay. What do you think?
Just from a production side, watching this one again, because this is one that I've seen a lot, and I have to say that like the design of the episode, the special effects, I feel like they're kind of bad, and that actually took me out of it in many ways. But I think the writing kind of saves this. Now we have this premise that you and I don't necessarily buy. You have to take this idea of these planets having this kind of warfare with a huge grain of salt. But I think the script is really good. I think the dialogue is really good. So I kind of do love it. It is familiar ground. Like it's a good parallel, though not exactly the same as Return of the Archons. And I think this is stuff that Star Trek does pretty well. So, I'm going to give it a qualified yes, it holds up. How about you?
I would give it a total yes, it holds up. The disruptor didn't bother me so much. Mm-hmm. I know you had problems with that, and I don't know what other design elements you honestly had a problem with. I mean... from the production elements, like the costumes, the set design. Now, that matte painting is gorgeous. Yeah. The exterior. I just think that as a studio shot piece of television, the design, it sort of took me out of it. But the thing that brought me back was the writing. This is always going to be a show, that was produced in the 1960s, though. Yeah. So, you're going to hit times where the design is kind of going to bother you. it seems to me. I actually kind of like the disruptors. I like seeing the different designs of the different hand weapons everywhere they go. Like the one that Pike had in the cage that showed back up in What Are Little Girls Made Of? Right. It's kind of neat to see, they can't keep drawing the same laser every week. So it's kind of neat to see, okay, well, this week we need a new laser. Okay, well, or, whatever it's going to be. Kind of disappointing that there's no, beam that comes out of it. But maybe you don't need one. I mean, it was certainly disruptive, even without the beam.
Well, Ken, can I be very honest with you and our audience? I'll put it this way. Two-tone jumpsuit in A Taste of Armageddon?
Yeah.
No. Two-tone jumpsuit in What Are Little Girls Made Of? Yes.
I see.
So
I see how I know what you're doing there. I know what you're doing. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, carry on.
Was there, it's hard to say that there wasn't a message in this one, but can you identify it?
I think there are a few. I think the important one here is really summarizing Kirk's speech, that we have these parts of ourselves that we fight, that we hold back, and we do try to behave as our better selves. This is the theme that we've come across in Star Trek a few times. And we decide not to kill. We decide not to have war because we have a choice. And all we have to do is live up to that choice. Now, there are other themes here, and that's why I like this episode, because it is provocative in so many other ways. I like the idea of exploring the blind faith to the machine. I like the idea of exploring the concept of war and the distance that technology creates for us. But I think Kirk really sums it up at the end. And I think, to me, that's the message. How about you?
Yeah. No, I'm 100% behind this episode. I like it a lot. It's not my favorite, but it's a really great episode. I mean, it challenges, and unfortunately, it still challenges us today. Turn on the news tonight at 6 or 6:30, wherever you happen to live. Well, whatever the national news, whatever time the national news comes on, you will see some things addressed in this episode that are still going on today. So I would say that this is one of those really great episodes that you can still go back and look at it and think, oh, wow, kind of like that thing that's happening now.
Yeah.
Sadly, but true. Except, of course, people are actually dying. People aren't choosing to die at the end of it, but the whole distance of warfare. I mean, that's going on even as we speak in places that we couldn't even spell.
Right. Well, hey, let me ask you this. We talked about Kirk's decision to break the Prime Directive and force these people into a position that he wanted them to face. Now, did he make the right decision? Because I keep thinking this, his logic is flawed and he violated the Prime Directive and all of this stuff. But Kirk's ultimate plan that he reveals to McCoy and to Spock at the end when they're sitting on their bridge is basically this. He said, look, if I didn't stop this, they would have gone on killing each other. If I did stop the warfare via computer, then they may have killed each other, but they would not have killed as many, potentially, as they would have by continuing on with the computer. So all Kirk is saying is, I wanted to stop the killing. And I may have stopped it a little bit, or I may have stopped it a lot. But his position is that.
Wow. Did he do the right thing? It turns out he did the right thing, but you remember Dr. Strangelove?
Yeah, of course.
The whole problem in Dr. Strangelove was that the Russians, or the Soviets, had come up with a, I can't remember what it was called now, but they basically came up with a machine where if they were attacked at all, they would empty every single thing and every single arsenal they had on the planet. This is the whole mutually assured destruction thing. We don't know that Vindikar hasn't come up with one of those.
Yeah.
When Kirk destroys the computer and the computer is no longer talking to the computer on Vindikar, we don't know that didn't trigger some failsafe that is going to empty, like the contents of a sun onto a Miniar. So, calculated risk, yes. Assuming an awful lot about the other planet. assuming that they have not, in fact, come up with a way to, okay, well, if the Minions really ever get out of line, we'll split their planet in half. I mean, so ideally, yes, except it's really not in keeping with the Federation. So, I mean, with the Prime Directive, it's...
I mean, Kirk acted on his gut.
Yeah,
here,
right.
You know, and yay, I'm glad it worked out for you. But,
exactly.
You know?
Exactly. Here's the problem. Are you going to fault the episode for sort of contradicting so much of Star Trek? Because
not at all.
It's a really great episode. That's the thing. And the decision that he makes, I mean, certainly it's the kind of decision you would hope that somebody would make here. But, you know, here we're trying to live our lives, not, you know, trying to write really good science fiction.
Yeah.
you know? Yeah. So, yes, I would say on planet Earth, he made the right call. In the Star Trek universe, I mean, it was Kirk's decision, so I guess he made the Kirk call. But I'm not sure. Maybe we should really learn a bit more about the Prime Directive before we start tossing it around.
Hey, guys, this is Matt from San Francisco. I'm in my car listening to the Corpsman's Maneuver podcast, and I just really love the use of the term fake it till you make it. And just trying to redeem that term, I totally agree with you. That is something that's kind of looked down on, but I think that's what it is. We give our emotions too much influence and say, if you don't really feel like it, if you're not doing it without trying, or if it's not difficult, then it's not real. But I think in this episode, Kirk really embodied something that's true, which is you believe something, and even if you don't want to do it, but you know it's right, that's what you do, and that really is who you are. You are the person who you decide, I don't feel like this. I don't know if I even believe it, but I'm going to act like someone who believes this would act because that's who I want to be. And if you do that often enough and long enough, that's who you become. That's how we become who we want to be. Thanks for the podcast. I love it, guys. It's great. And thanks for delving deeper into some really neat ideas.
Next week, let's get out of war for a moment. Let's get out of Armageddon, shall we? And let's check out what's happening on this side of paradise.
Some of the music for the mission log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. By my reckoning, when we reach the end of the mission log series, we will have solved all of the problems and dilemmas plaguing the planet. So, let's assume that that is the case. Go outside and play. End transmission.
Now leaving Nerdist.com.